Showtime! The Capital G Show starts right now.
2007 was without a doubt one of the most memorable years in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! History. It was a time of great innovation and variety, a true deck builder's paradise, a time where nearly everything decent had a chance of making it to the big time and reaching the legendary Shonen Jump Championship top 8. The year was full of surprises and gave birth to the craziest streak we've ever seen, in which 8 different Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks won 8 different Shonen Jump Championships in a row. 2007 may not have had a world-shattering booster set like Phantom Darkness, but to me it's the perfect snapshot of what the GX era really was and what made it so damn fun. Today I'll be sharing with you one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Stories, a story of how a man armed with nothing more than a rusty bucket of bolts and a dream shined brighter than anyone in the entire field and captured one of the most improbable championships of the year. Let's go back to the very end of 2006 to start this tale. For those unfamiliar, against all odds, David Rodriguez won the very last Shonen Jump Championship of 06 using his Cyberstein OTK. As we all know, him winning this event had dire and lasting consequences as it triggered the emergency banning of Cyberstein. At this point, this was the first in the game's history. The reason I'm bringing this up is because with both the Random Stein and the pure Cyberstein OTK no longer threats in the meta, most duelists felt incredibly comfortable playing much less defensively moving forward. After all, if the big bad Cyberstein was no longer there to punish your open field, what were you to fear? Everyone knew for years that Monarchs were never considered an OTK deck. They just didn't have that type of offensive potential, and even the new highly touted gadgets coming out in mid-January were going to share the same outgrind control playstyle as Monarchs. With Stein being put on ice permanently, many believed the metagame would simply default back to Old Faithful and Monarchs. What they lacked in offensive prowess, they made up for in consistency and versatility. In addition to Monarch variants, the new Machine Revolt structure deck was releasing in just 10 days before the year's first Shonen Jump Championship. Machine Revolt was going to be one of the hottest products of the entire year, as it finally gave the TCG access to the long-awaited gadget archetype. A small but insanely reliable army where all your monsters floated into others. While they lacked impressive stats, the fact that you only needed to draw a single copy of a gadget to have a near endless supply of them was very reassuring. The TCG had already observed their great success in the OCG region and was well versed on how to build the deck, packing in simple yet effective one-for-one removal cards like Fissure, Sakuretsu Armor, and Smashing Ground. These removal cards could not only continue to simplify the game state where gadgets obviously excelled, but they also removed monsters on the field that the gadgets themselves lack the power to. It all made sense. 2 control and grindy powerhouses set the battle for the meta throne, one with years of a proven competitive track record in Monarchs, and the other that hit the OCG like a wrecking ball. But what if I told you there was a third option, one that did have the explosive power to end the game in a single turn, just like the Cyberstein deck, one that could easily main deck cards to counter gadget and Monarch strategies simultaneously. A deck not for the faint of heart, but built for speed and just enough defensive fallback options that you could play defensively for a few turns if needed. Well, such a deck did exist. It was just buried in the shadow of the Cyberstein OTK for the last months of 2006. The deck I'm referring to is the Chimera Tech Overdragon OTK. Many hadn't realized it yet, but thanks to Zane Truesdale from the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, the machine type had actually skyrocketed to being one of the best 2 types in the entire game, on par with Warriors. This was mainly in part thanks to the release of Power of the Duelist in August 2006. This set gave machines potent and valuable support cards such as Future Fusion, Overload Fusion, and Chimera Tech Overdragon. Most of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community knew the explosive potential of Chimera Tech Overdragon, the fact that it could be summoned having easily over 10,000 attack in most cases, and would be able to attack all monsters your opponent controlled for guaranteed OTKs, but the potential and the results just never came together as you might expect. Post Power of the Duelist, its metaphorical cousin, the Cyberstein OTK deck, was the one that received all the attention and achieved the Shonen Jump Championship winning winning success. Moving towards Shonen Jump Orlando, which was going to be held in the final week of January 2007, the Gadgets came out predictably hell-bent on proving that they were among the best decks in the game in whatever region they were in. They thrived in their first week of regionals, giving duelists even more confidence in their performance at Orlando, some even going as far as to declare that they were the favorite to take the event. When Shonen Jump Orlando finally arrived, we got a good amount of what we expected. Despite being brand new, Gadgets were incredibly popular at the event and they were doing well. Monarchs, as always, were well represented and were looking like a very strong contender, but what a lot of duelists straight up were not prepared for was the barrage of machine decks that took Florida over at the event, and I'm obviously not referring to Gadgets here. For all the talk of Gadgets and Monarchs, out of seemingly nowhere, a staggering half of the top 8 of Orlando was running a version of the Chimera Tech Overdragon OTK, this making it instantly the favorite to pull off a huge shock and win the event. How did this deck sneak up on everyone? How did it do so well against Gadgets and Monarchs that were such heavy favorites for the event? These are probably the questions that you're asking right about now. Well, the first thing to note was that the Chimera Tech Overdragon OTK deck had been legal for about 5 months in the TCG, basically with no major competitive accomplishments to its name, so many just deemed it a flop and it wasn't taken very seriously. And to answer the second question, you need to look no further than little old Cyber Phoenix. This card almost single-handedly kept the machine type viable throughout the entire 2007 year. For you see, while this card is in attack position, Cyber Phoenix negates the effects of all spells and traps that tried to target your machine type monsters on the field. It goes without saying that this dealt a huge blow to Gadgets and Monarchs alike. Monarchs would lose their ability to use powerful tributing cards such as Soul Exchange, Enemy Controllers, Snatch, Steal, and Brain Control, while Gadgets would find many of their removal cards like Sakuretsu Armor and Ring of Destruction completely useless. In addition, the removal of Cyberstein actually aided the Chimera Tech OTK decks. As I said earlier, because Stein OTK wasn't a thing anymore, most duelists didn't prepare for decks to have the ability to OTK them at the drop of the hat and went into this event thinking that getting OTK'd wasn't even a possibility. Because of this, most players didn't run cards like Book of Moon or Solemn Judgment. This is important to note because the Chimera Tech duelists used cards like Heavy Storm and Giant Trunade, which was semi-limited by the way. Without Solemn Judgment, there'd be absolutely no way of stopping these cards. The same could be said about Book of Moon, as it could put a Jinzo face down so that they could use their other traps to defend themselves. Jinzo was ran by all 4 members of the top 8 who were running the Overdragon deck. In fact, Mark Vasquez, better known as Waffle, decided to play both cards in his Monarch variant. Waffle hailed from Florida, and whispers around the states were that Team Nexus were cooking up a new machine deck just for this event. He anticipated a heavy machine presence at the event and subsequently made it all the way to the finals. There he faced off against the highly improbable man on fire, Paul Lynn. Paul was a member of the well-known and highly accomplished Florida-based Team Nexus. They were looking for their 3rd Shonen Jump championship. Paul was running the Chimera Tech Overdragon OTK deck, but his build was far from the standard. In fact, it was as far as you could have possibly gotten from the standard. When it comes to Paul's deck, this is probably some of the most outside-the-box thinking I have ever seen for a major championship winning deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! First off, he completely ditched conventional wisdom. The amazing Cyber Phoenix that could single-handedly win you games against Gadgets and Monarchs, he didn't run the card at all, which was baffling because the other 3 members of the top 8 who were also running the Chimera Tech Overdragon OTK, they deemed the card so important they ran a full-on playset of UFO Turtle just so that they could get to it as soon as possible. Secondly, he opted to run Barrel and not 1 but 2 copies of Blowback Dragon for the potential removal and for the off chance of making Gatlin Dragon. Third, he really went outside the box when he decided to add an entire Ancient Gear engine, a playset of Cannon, Drill, and 2 copies of Ancient Gear Soldier. It looked incredibly questionable on paper, but they actually served legitimate purposes. Since Paul wasn't relying on his normal summon unlike the other players, Cannon could be used so that he could completely lock out his opponent's battle traps. Drill, on the other hand, could be used to tutor Future Fusion or Overload Fusion straight from his deck, and the clause about how you couldn't activate the card in the turn that you set it on the field field, that could be worked around with Giant Trunade, which was actually kind of spicy. Lastly, being on Florida's best team, Paul knew how prominent the deck was going to be at the event, and while the other 3 players in top 8 used their trap slots for speed with cards like Reckless and Jar of Greed, Paul instead used his extra slots for stalling as he named deck Swords of Revealing Light, Gravity Bind, Mirror Force, Torrential Tributes, and a whopping 3 copies of Nightmare Steel Cage. Keep in mind, 2 of these cards could be looped for more turns with Giant Trunade. This actually meant that he could stall the game out if things went bad with his opening hand. In the end, Paul's very strange Chimera Tech deck, aptly named Old Bucket of Bolts, was simply too much for Waffle or really anyone else. He won the finals in a 2-0 blowout, including a glorious Game 1 win where he summoned Overdragon with Overload Fusion by using a ridiculous 16 machines. It hit the board with almost 13,000 attack, and I personally believe that Waffle never recovered after Game 1. When you looked at these machine OTK decks, they simply had too many ways to reliably pull off the OTK, and it wasn't just Future Fusion into Overload Fusion, but they also had Limiter Removal and Dimension Fusion, which was completely unlimited at the time. To me, this is still one of the most shocking Shonen Jump Championship wins, even by today's standards, because not only did you have a deck that completely came out of nowhere, but even when you look at Paul's deck and compared it to his peers' variants, it was just completely different. Like, his deck was really his own creation, and he played it, perfectly to victory. Lastly, if you're wondering whatever happened to the Chimera Tech OTK deck, well, about a month later on the March 1st, 2007 ban list, Konami did limit Overload Fusion and Dimension Fusion. This effectively killed this particular version of the deck. However, machines would continue to be a tier 1 deck for the rest of the year, and at the ripe old age of 38, Paul Lin is the oldest player to ever win a Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series event or Shonen Jump Championship. So, you're never really too old to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That's always been a stigma in the game, and I think that Paul proved it about a dozen years ago that, even old players can still get the job done. So, you guys let me know what you thought of this Yu-Gi-Oh! Story. If you guys are interested in seeing any more Yu-Gi-Oh! Stories, leave that in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos. Subscribing makes life happy.